Well, welcome to another episode of the Grazing Sheep Podcast. I'm your host, Big Tom Perkins, along with Dr. Cameron Meyerly. And I think today we're going to talk about these advantage feeders.
Yeah,
Uh,
and you bit the bullet and went ahead and spent the money and got one. So are you liking it? So I guess we ought to start too. Why do you want to talk about it?
well, I was promised, where I was given a mineral feeder if I would give a review of the mineral feeder. And it was never actually stated, but I figured a mineral feeder is a mineral feeder. You can't quite do a whole episode on just a mineral feeder, so we figured
Yeah,
we probably
that episode's pretty quick. I've got two questions for you. Is one, does it hold mineral?
it does hold minerals.
Okay, and then two, does it do a halfway decent job of keeping the weather out of it?
So far, it does. The worst part of the whole thing was all the instructions are written in Australian.
Oh, right.
So if
Of
you
course they
can't
are.
speak Australian, you're going to have a hard time putting this thing together. Now, luckily for me, I'm bilingual and I can speak Australian. So I just opened it up, looked right at it. Oh, I had no problem at all with it.
It just comes naturally to you.
Right. Yeah. The first thing they
Yeah.
did was they gave you, you've got nuts, you've got bolts, you've got some washers, you've got spaces, and then they've got a spanner. Now, a lot of people don't know what a spanner is. Yeah. We just call them wrenches. Yeah.
Oh,
But they call them spanners.
nice.
All right. And then they're big on candy over there. So they size everything by M&Ms. So
Sounds about right.
right. See, so what you had to do, you had to get your 13 wrench to fit that so that you could tighten those bolts and stuff down, you see.
That's pretty good.
Because without
That's
all
pretty
that,
good.
you don't know what you're talking about. The other thing that's really weird over there is they measure things by kangaroos,
The old KGs.
the old kgs. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that's what that is that's kangaroos. So
Nice.
you got to go that route too.
Yeah.
So there's some conversion rate. I don't know what. So I think their kangaroos must be small over there. That's all I can figure.
Yes, that's about how it goes. Um, and it does, on the setting side of things, it does get a little confusing if um, you're just trying to do it there in your head. But I will say, like the table they provide has both that kilograms and pounds annotation there, and is useful. So you've been using it though. You got it set up. What size did you end up buying? And I guess for those that don't know, an advantage feeder, if they're not familiar with it, what is it and how does it operate?
Well, it is a lick feeder in that instead of the animal putting its mouth in there and just eating, to its heart's content, or in sheep's case until they die, um, they literally have to stick their tongue in the opening. The feed sticks to their tongue, and then they pull the feed back into their mouth. And the theory behind it is that eventually their tongue gets dry and they can't take any more in, and so now they have to go get a drink, and then come back to that feeder. Um, and what I see is that sheep go eat for a little bit and then they go off and graze. I haven't seen one smart enough to say, "Okay, my tongue's dry. Go get a drink. Now come back and eat and eat and eat and eat." Okay, my tongue's dry. Go get a drink. Come back and eat and eat and eat. They don't seem to do
So
that. So it is a limited access feeder, and so we have it set right around that 3/4 pound, which is 88 kangaroos. That's what
there you go.
it's what it's set up to. It's that's not quite true because I guess it's 0.88 in American, and so they do have. I was disappointed in that I did not get a like manual with it that you could
Hmm.
sit down and read all through it. I guess maybe their thought was that it was self-explanatory enough that you didn't need such a thing. But they do have lots of charts on there, that you can sit down and read the charts. What I have trouble with is because it is angled, I guess, away from you. So the top of the feeder is closer to your head than the bottom of the feeder.
Mm, yes.
So wearing glasses, I have trouble reading that. I
Right.
almost have to get down on the ground and lay down and look up to see it. I I always want to grab a hold of it, the top of it, and push it away from me so it's flat, so that I could read it. But so I ended up just kind of taking my phone and taking pictures of it, and then I could sit and read it and see what the settings are. And it's definitely not hard to adjust it. It's just maybe hard to figure out exactly what that adjustment should be.
Right.
So our sheep didn't know anything about it at all.
Now, granted, you have like a brand new one.
Yep.
So you have, I think, what they call cams on
Right.
that lower play. And I guess again, for anybody that's interested that's not familiar with it, you can find the product there at advantagefeeders.com. And as Tom had mentioned, they're licking out of, best way to describe it would be a groove in this feeder. So, if you're used to seeing a self feeder, with a bulk area and then it feeds down below, um, it's a gravity fed
Hmm.
feeder. And if you were to open it up all the way, it would operate just like any hog feeder, Smedley cattle feed, whatever you're familiar with, it would operate very similarly to how that is how we're delivering feed in those free choice scenarios.
Yep.
And the difference is this feeder has two adjustments. So it has an upper adjustment that is basically, again, if you're familiar with hog feeders, and I only bring that up because that's what we were utilizing primarily in our creek pens. Uh, if you have like a double sided or single sided rectangular hog feeder, there's a what's called a slide on that top part, usually
Yep.
adjusted with some wing nuts or some bolts or something, that goes vertically up and down. And as you know, that's controlling the rate of feed so that it's not just pouring out and trying to limit waste. Uh, Now the Advantage feeder also has a bottom plate that is adjusted and slides up. And that's really what, if that bottom plate wasn't there, that feed could just keep pouring out. But it's a shelf essentially that feed hits and stops there. And then between that upper plate and that bottom shelf, it creates a groove. And that's where the sheep example, they actually have to turn their heads sideways and lick that feed out of that groove.
Yep.
And I think there's also, so it's kind of dual species, sheep, cattle, whatever. At least that's what they advertise. And there is a grate that goes across there with about 4-inch openings. That's an estimate. And we've actually just taken it out, per some advice from the individual that we're using it for with their sheep. And then I think with cattle, it would be useful because if anybody's watched maybe some dairy cattle or some beef cattle at a bunk feeder, to see them just whip that head around and use
Yep.
that tongue to really scoop and scrape. And I think a cow could probably scoop or pull quite a bit of that feed out and then eat it out of that trough.
Yeah,
But
I could easily see a cow put that tongue and start at one end and just scoop that feed all the way
and just,
down that
right,
slot. And
yep,
any feed that falls out does fall into a tray, so
yes,
it doesn't just fall and hit the ground. And they can easily eat it out of there. But I could see a cow going from one end to the other, just scooping all that out and then going back and eating everything that's there. And yeah, you're right. That groove slot or that they're like ovals, and yeah, they're like 4 or 5 inches long, And I think on
Right.
mine, I think there was like 5 of those, so you'd have like 5 ewes could stand there and eat at one time. But
Yeah.
it keeps that ewe like concentrated in one area where she's standing there licking,
Right.
pushing others out of the way, kind of a.
Right.
But we took ours out. The hardest part of it was teaching sheep to eat out of it. Um, our sheep would go up and try to get the grain, and then just give up because they couldn't get it. They just could not figure out how to stick their tongue in there to get it.
Yeah,
Um,
we were kind of joking, and we just came off of a couple of episodes here talking about EBVs later this summer, and had texted Tom because we about the time he had purchased his, we began to use one here at the home farm, and our ewes didn't have a problem, went right to it and started eating away, and had to send him a picture one day and tried to convince him to buy a ram from us next year with a little bit higher curiosity plus index. And then he wouldn't have that problem. They'd just go to the feeder and eat as soon as he put feed into it. But obviously that doesn't exist. I was pretty
so
proud of that one.
yeah, so
But how long did it take you to get them acclimated to that feeder?
maybe maybe a week. Um,
Okay.
I read the directions on the feeder, and on the feeder itself, it does say start with something like soy hull pellets.
Right.
And so you don't have to worry about if you did this with corn, and the soy hull pellet, they tell you open the feeder open, wide open, and put feed in it. And so your sheep just come up and they just eat like they would out of any other buck. So they can easily stick their lips down in there and just eat. And but if you did that with corn, you'd have a bunch of dead sheep, within a day or so, because you'd have acidosis like crazy. And
Right.
um, if they weren't acclimated at all to feed. So the theory is you use something like soy hull pellets, and they can eat to the heart's content, and it's not going to hurt them. And so we just opened the thing up pretty close to wide open, so they could get in there and just eat and eat and eat and eat. And for one, it just lets the sheep know, hey, this is a great place to come eat. There's good stuff here. And then we just would make an adjustment twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening, and just start narrowing that up. And then once we got it down to about where we thought we wanted to be, then we started mixing corn and soy hull pellets together to slowly convert them over to a corn ration. And then we have oats too, so we were mixing oats and corn together, and probably like a 25 to 75%, 25% grain and 75% soy hull pellets, and then just kind of mix that over until we finally got them over to the all corn and oats part of it. But we did that probably. We may have been able to go faster, but we were just making on those cams. You can do those. So that those cams has a series of numbers. I think it's 1 to 7, but there's also you can go 1.5, 2.5. There's half measures on there as well. And then the slide that goes up and down, it has a series of holes numbered like 1 through 6 or something like that. And you don't have to move that lever exactly you know to those holes. You can use a half position in there as well. But
Yeah.
so we were just making those minute adjustments, just making that narrower and narrower, and it took us about a week to get down to where we wanted to be. But
Right.
so my guess now is, we could take that feeder out, and probably at any time we put that feeder back in, those animals, that those group of animals would know how to use it, and they would go right to it. So we had
Yeah.
started it out on a group of ewes that we were hoping to flush, and we realized that by the time by the time they got it figured out, it was going to push our breeding back, and so we ended up just
Mm.
pulling it out of that, sticking it in another group, and getting them used to eating that. And I
And
would,
what size did you end up going with? I guess I should mention, they have something as small as uh, what like a 200 model, and I don't know if it's HD is their lettering after that, and I believe that's head, and it like 200 head. I don't know that for sure. Um,
I think that's 200 head. They do have one that you can mount to like a gate.
yeah, and so that's the 200 model.
Yeah.
And I believe it holds 200 pounds. So like it also those values kind of go along with what the capacity is, give or take, a certain amount of weight. But they go from 200 clear up to uh, an 8,000
Yeah.
model. And I believe I did some research on these um, a little bit ago, and I believe the 8,000 head, depending on what you're feeding, because we obviously know that those feedstuffs take up different volumes. Um, but they're estimated in there, feed volume of 160 bushel. When we're thinking about corn, I want to say it was right around 5 ton
Mm.
uh, of wheat or corn. And then if we're feeding, pellets, maybe something that takes up a little bit more volume, is right around that 4 ton mark. So, we're right around 8,000 pounds on that big unit, which is a lot of feed. But if we're utilizing it, I think the value, is utilizing these in the applications that you had mentioned. So to flush ewes while we're out on pasture, if I have that many ewes, or maybe I don't want to, I've got a more remote location, I don't want to be hauling feed to it all the time.
Mhm.
Um, Maybe I can fill up one of those 8,000 units and, park it at my furthest, distance, my furthest field. And then I'm not worried about, delivering that feed. And they also have some models with some wheel kits
Yeah.
on them, which I think, again, would be very convenient to get to those more remote locations if you didn't want to deal, or maybe you don't have the equipment to deal with an 8,000 head um, model. So that I don't know when that feeder is full, it would take a large piece of equipment to move it.
Yeah.
I don't I don't think
Right. I
you're
think,
moving that with the front end loader or the skid steer.
yeah,
Um,
I think
because
with that,
that's a lot of weight. But
would hook into it with a tractor and you would drive it back home and you would fill it up and you would drive it back to wherever you're going to have it and kind of, but I
yeah.
think these are versatile enough. There's a lot of different ways you can use them. I know. So we have the 1200. It was supposed to roughly, accommodate 75 head. And 75 head of sheep are not going to stand there and eat all at the same time. I don't think, I think with mine, I can get about 4 ewes across on each side of it. Um, so there'd be about 8 ewes eating at one time. And amazingly enough, I mean, we've not let it go empty. I would imagine if you let it go empty and then you first put it in there, everybody and their brother would be trying to get in there at the same time. But they just seems like all day long, you look over and there's one or two over there eating, you know,
Mm,
a little bit, and then they go graze or they go lay under the wagon in shade, whatever, whatever they're going to do. But I,
right.
the theory that I was told was the one that I bought, that 1200, was pretty good for 75 ewes for, in a 24-hour period. It
Okay.
seems like it is. So
Yeah, and that's where, it could be, again, assuming we have that head, the HD, assuming we're interpreting that correctly.
I don't think
Um,
I don't think that's head.
okay. It probably isn't, but
My
we know it, we know that it'll hold 8,000 pounds. It doesn't mean we want to feed a pound a day to
No,
those ewes. We're not going to go out and use one feeder, because we are restricted, even in feedlot scenarios where they're on full feed, where there isn't any type of saliva restriction or feed restriction there. We know that there's only so many sheep that can visit that feeder in a day.
mm,
So, like you said, there are head requirements, or a carrying capacity requirement of what they can do, depending on how many sheep we're trying to feed out of that. Now, I think the other very intriguing aspect of this is their creep panel that they have, and a panel is deceptive. The creep function they have on these feeders,
Mm.
and you probably haven't used that yet. You're getting ready to have some fall lambs here, and you're going to get to try it out this fall. But you want to explain a little bit your understanding of that creep, um, restriction to keep those mature ewes out and allow those lambs to eat.
Yeah, so they call it a creep panel, and basically what it is a piece of metal, a long flat plate, with no sharp edges or anything on it, that hinges and has a series of slots. And you basically, pull this lever, and so it unpins, and you can angle it up or down. And near as I can tell, the theory behind it is that an adult sheep, you make it small enough that an adult sheep cannot get their head up in there to eat, where a lamb would have no trouble at all getting its head up in there to eat, because its head's so much smaller, it's standing lower to the ground, and all that. So a sheep may be able to, a ewe may be able to get her head up in there, but then it's going to restrict its where it hits on the back of the neck, so that it can't get its head all the way up in, so that it can lick that feed. So I know on mine, and I think most of these, there's a divider plate in the middle of it, of the feeder itself, so that you can feed like a ewe feed on one side of it and a creep feed on the other side.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have a fence or anything up, so that you just have sheep on one side, and adult ewe or lambs on one side and ewes on the other. You certainly could you know do that um, in a fence line kind of a situation, where you've got one class of sheep on one side, one class of sheep on the other side. But we're
Yeah.
on just using whole corn and oats on the ewe side, and then a creep feed on the other side that we figured lambs can get up into and eat from there. And then we'll probably have to play around with the openings to figure out how much creep we want those lambs to be able to get to, and so
Well,
on.
and really, the nice thing is with that creep panel, as long as you know the ewes aren't getting into it, you can have it all the way open.
Yeah.
You can have a free choice creep without those ewes having access to it. And the other thing, one of the difficulties when we talk about creep feeding is that acclimation of that newborn lamb or that new lamb to feed.
Mm.
And so if that ewe is going to this feeder and that lamb learns to consume feed out of this feeder, something, depending on how tight your group is and you're feeding some grain in the feeder, um, to put a ewe ration in both sides for the first 2 weeks of that lambing window, or maybe for the week, feed the ewes out of it, and then for a week after that last lamb is born, then set that creep up so that those lambs have seen their dams go over and consume feed out of it,
Mhm.
and they're already trained they know feed is in that tray, in that trough. So I think, again, there's a lot of opportunities, and as you mentioned, the division, that center divider on both sides, certainly in the potential that you're talking about of putting a creep ration on one side, a lactation ration on the other side, I think has a lot of value. And then likewise, that fence line application. If I wanted to use it as in a permanent pen, or maybe out in my pasture, that might get a little more difficult, but to split up two paddocks on each side, but using it as part of that fence line,
Yeah.
and then feeding two separate rations on either side of that feeder, I think just offers a lot of flexibility to the product and to the producer.
Oh, I think so. I think I think we're really gonna like it. I got a feeling well, I was gonna say this fall. We're already in fall, but probably sometime this winter, we're probably gonna buy a second one.
Are you?
Yeah.
You think you'll stick with the same size? Or you're gonna go bigger?
No, I think I'm gonna stick with the same size. I just think we move ours every day because we're moving
Right.
sheep every day, and I just took a tow strap and I just put it through the legs. It's built on skids. The skids are part of the unit, and
Right.
we just put the tow strap through the skids and hook it to the little tractor and or the
Now,
ga-
technically, you're
it,
not supposed to do that, correct?
well, in Australia they do. Here in the US they frown upon it for some reason.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're either going to ruin ours and then find out, yeah, you can do that, or
And I think part of it is, I think part of the issue is, if they tell you, "Oh, yeah, you can tow them around," and then I go buy that 8,000 unit, and
yes,
I'm getting out there and
yeah,
acting like it's a tractor pull at the county fair, like,
that's a
there's a chance that we start to break a weld or some of those connections fail because there's a lot of weight. I'm not as concerned, like, on the 1,200 unit or even, I think there's a 25.
yeah.
Um, it I'm less concerned at those sizes than the big ones, but how do they say, "Yeah, these you can haul around, just grab them and go," and the others, let's not do it because,
I think that it
people.
is we haven't filled ours clear full. Um,
Okay,
because we don't want to wear those skids out. I don't know that you would just pulling on grass. We're
I
we're
doubt it.
yeah, we're sliding across the top of grass, so we're not digging into anything. We do have a gravel driveway. Um, when the time comes that we have to go down the gravel driveway, we'll probably just grab the skid loader. Because it's made to pick up easily with a skid loader and pallet forks. So we'll probably put the pallet forks on, go out, pick that up, and then put it where we want. Because you're dragging metal down with any kind of weight in it. Across gravel, you're gonna start chewing things up.
Right.
But I think on just going across grass, we haven't had an issue with it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think in terms of just how it's built, yeah, it feels solid.
Yeah,
Impressed with the engineering and how everything is put together. I do think it's a kind of a neat feature. Something that I appreciate is, we'd mentioned the like lick guard. I don't know if that's what you would call it, with the small square holes on it that can be removed. Yeah, that's one long piece of metal.
yep,
Instead of me pulling it out and sticking it in the corner of my barn and forgetting about it where it's at when I need to use it in the future, it actually slides up, under the roof
yeah.
of the feeder. Uh,
That's
it's self-contained, and I think that's a nice feature. Again, something that
that's
that
where
I appreciate.
that's where both of ours are. And we've not, they've not fallen out. Moving around in the fields. The little you get like a little socket wrench type of deal, so you can loosen up everything and move your panels as you want. It has a little slot that those stay in. It also has a I don't know, we just call it the stick. I don't know what the technical term is, but you can use it to make sure that you're not plugged up.
Right.
It has this basically a flat piece of metal with a curve on the end of it, and you can put that curve on the bottom of that tray and just run it across.
Have
And
you had any issue with
yeah,
feed getting.
every once in a while we'll look and it's like, huh, there's not a lot of feed right there, and we'll take that and just run it over, and that feed falls in.
Yeah,
Um,
is that the corn, like, are you getting buildup or.
yeah, it's not really build up, wind up. This corn's not necessarily all the cleanest corn. It's got a bit of
Right.
here and there, and so that seems to be what it is. Just piece
Okay.
just came down and is just sitting in there funny. I think too, you could end up with a couple corn kernels that get wedged in there. Um,
Right.
easily get it loose with that tool. But again, the handy thing with that is that tool has a space to fit in and a little snap, and when you push it past that snap, and it does not fall out.
Right.
So it stays in there. It's amazing. Every time I've gone to get the tool, it's there. When you put the mineral feeder on, it you can't use the socket type to make an adjustment. They give you a little flat wrench that you can easily slide in behind the mineral feeder, which you don't have. And you didn't get the
Uh,
little flat wrench. or did you with
You know,
your?
we have the mineral feeder on the one end, and that was going to be if I had to complain about anything, uh, the the fact that the mineral feeder covers up the bolts on the end for
Yeah.
the what would be the bottom adjustment
Yes, when you buy
is
a
has
metal feeder,
been
they
a
do
pain.
a flat wrench, and it's super easy to use. There just isn't anywhere good to put the flat wrench on that unit. Um,
Right.
we found a little spot and we stuck it in there, and it managed to stay on for like 3 moves, I think it was. And then I just happened to walk back through, and I looked down, and there was that wrench laying there, and I was like,
Nice.
"Well, we're not putting that back on. We'll just throw it in the
Yeah.
cabinet." So that's where ours rides now, is in the Gator toolbox. But
Yep.
yeah, I wish there was a spot there for that it would stay in. Um, and I didn't see in the directions, I didn't see that listed at all. But maybe somebody will get a hold of us and say, "Hey, you moron, it goes over here. That's what this is for." But I haven't seen that yet.
Right. Right. Some secret cubby.
But overall,
Yeah. Yeah, that would really be my only complaint. Like I said, I'm excited that we used it here to flush some ewes out on pasture, and in years previously we're utilizing whole shelled corn in some PVC pipe type feeders, and there's just too many sheep
mm,
to and PVC is too expensive to
yeah,
go out and build new feeders. And so this has really been a a nice addition to kind of our management strategy, and to utilize it in those kind of specific times, those management times that, if I can get it adjusted correctly. And uh, I went back and forth because we were running whole shelled corn through it to flush those ewes, and have really struggled getting it to where it needs to be to limit it to the level that I'd like it to be. And I don't, with those bigger kernel type feeds, like you said, one turn sideways, or you have some cob in there, and it just doesn't feed the way that you'd like it to. So we were feeding about 1 1/4, uh, probably a little bit less than that a day, and a little bit more than what I would have liked to flush those ewes on, but they didn't mind. So hopefully they return the favor here in the
maybe
spring with additional lambs. So that's
that.
what we're hoping for, at least.
So I think the other thing
But
to be said with this type of a feeder is, if you're making a wet feed, if you're putting liquid molasses in it, I would think
oh
you
yeah,
you would have some problems because it's going to bridge up. It's not going to flow as well. But some
correct.
oats, corn, I would think just about any pelleted feed.
Yep, whole grains,
I think
cracked corn. We were running some ground corn, not ground, but cracked corn with some soybean meal when we first got it. And I knew I wanted to see more an experiment on my side. I wanted to see how much it would gum up.
mhm,
And I was in there every day. I didn't feed a bunch through it, but I was in there every day cleaning out, just junk, just gunk that that dust fraction of the cracked corn and the soybean meal is not. It's a fine material that
yep,
can be dusty.
yep.
It
So
just
that liquid from
collides with that saliva and sticks down in there.
that's exactly what it is. So, so overall, I think it's a good feeder. I'd highly recommend it. I've seen some of the other ones, and I'm not too impressed with those ones, just the way they're built. So this is a well built, solid unit. I'm real impressed with it so far.
Yeah, we'll see if you can get your dollars out of it. That's probably the other complaint I have on it. They can get a little spendy, a little
Yep.
pricey. So hopefully it takes away some of the work involved, reduces some labor, and possibly even improves some efficiency of feed utilization out on grass.
I think it will. Well, we're coming up on our time here, Cam. It's been good discussing this feeder with you, and like I say, I think we're both pretty happy with them. So We thank you for listening to another episode of the Grazing Sheep Podcast. We've got a Facebook page. Be sure to go on there and like and follow. If you got any questions, you can ask them there. Any comments, you can leave them there. I've got an email address. You can reach out to me at bigtomperkins@gmail.com. And again, any questions, any comments. And so we just like to thank everybody for listening. We're getting an awful lot of plays. And everywhere I go, everybody's like, hey, you're that guy for the Grazing Sheep Podcast.
Right.
For- So it's been good talking to you, Cam. So we'll catch up with you later.
Sounds good. You have a good one, Tom.
Yep. Bye.